Ben, we have an unprecedented development here in round 3 of this week's co-main event podcast, and that is that during our extremely thorough and detailed pre-production meeting for the co-main event podcast, we could not decide on a topic for round 3. And basically, I advocated that we should do a round about Ben Askren and whether or not Scott Coker is right or wrong to sort of downplay the possibility of him coming to Bellator, and whether or not Bellator could profit from it, or whether or not Ben Askren needs to come to that promotion to beat someone who's any good to sort of prove his claim to any sort of legacy in the sport of MMA. And you wanted to talk about the Professional Fighters League. Is it $1 Million Tournament or $1 Million Tournaments, plural?
Well, there's tournaments in each weight class.
Okay,
yeah.
See, you're smartening me up here to what's going on over in the PFL. So why don't you go ahead and start? Like, what is it about the Professional Fighters League $1 Million Tournaments that you think makes for a good third round?
Well, I wanted to talk about this one because I thought, especially after us talking about the Bellator tournament, there's a different but similar thing going on with this PFL tournament. Because you look at who's in the tournament, we've gone over this before, a lot of Magomeds are in this tournament.
See, I was going to say the only thing I know about any of these tournaments is that there's a lot of Magomeds in there.
There's also,
and I'm going to guess, this is just a guess, that Rick Story is in one of them.
Rick Story is in the welterweight tournament.
There we go.
But then you got a lot of Jason High, Will Brooks in the lightweight tournament. You got, let's see, guys like John Howard, Eddie Gordon in the middleweight tournament. A lot of people you haven't thought of in a little while. Sean O'Connell in the light heavyweight tournament.
Okay, noted author.
Yeah.
Sean O'Connell.
Jared Rosholt and Sean Jordan, who we were just talking about, and Mike Kyle in the heavyweight tournament. But the point I wanted to make here is that, again, like Bellator, PFL finds itself in the situation where, you've rebranded from World Series of Fighting. You're in a space that doesn't seem like it has room for even a first place and second place promotion, let alone a third place promotion. You really got to work hard to try to get noticed and to try to convince people that they should care about you. You can't really do it anymore by the, hey, we have the best fighters in the world kind of thing. That just doesn't seem to work. And also, it seems like people care less and less about that. What is proven to be more successful is saying, like, we have somebody you already know. They're going to fight somebody else you already know or somebody you used to like. But you're trying to find a way to get people interested and to make them feel like this shit matters. And money is an actual legitimate way of doing it. Like the idea that, hey, the winner in each one of these tournaments, and this is the part that's hard to get MMA fans to believe, will actually get $1 million for winning that fight.
Okay, see, my initial question is that money in escrow right now? And can you show me the receipts?
Now, see, that's something that I would be interested in digging into further as we get closer to this tournament beginning. Because that is a legitimate question that anybody who has been around the fight game for any length of time, that's going to be their first question.
Right.
And do you have the money? It
speaks to our previous involvement in this sport and what this sport is like, that like we immediately are trying to figure out how that's a hoax, right? That we're like, well, is it $1 million over the life of the tournament? Like if you win 3 or 4 fights, you get paid $300,000 each time, and then by the time because that's what Bellator tried to do, right?
Right, but even that would be noteworthy. Even if you tell me like you have to win 4 fights or something, and it's 4 fights for a total of $1 million purse, for the guys who are at the level of fighting in the PFL, that would still be a huge deal. The part where I would get concerned is, hey, wait a minute, how are these contracts structured? Because, like, if you get to the point where, like, you have all the semifinals set, but you realize the company is falling apart, can you just cancel everything and be like, sorry, the contract says you only get that money if you win the final fight, and nobody won the final fight because we didn't get there, therefore, like, you're all screwed. Because I could see something like that happening in this sport. But it also, like, it makes the same point that it's kind of one of the theories I've heard tossed around and that I actually really believe is that one of the mistakes the UFC has made is in trying to like nickel and dime its fighters and trying to keep it small time as far as what it has to pay out to people. It does itself a disservice because like what makes somebody a superstar in fighting? I mean, yeah, there's like this charisma element. There's kind of an X factor about personality and how you win fights and all that stuff and the different things that do or don't capture people's imagination. But money is the way to convince us that this is a big-time deal and that somebody is a real superstar. Like, what makes Conor McGregor seem like a superstar? Because he's out there talking about all the goddamn money he has all the time. Same with Floyd Mayweather. Like, that actually works. That will get people's attention. And if you tell me that somebody has a chance to go from, like, rags to riches by winning a couple fights in one night, suddenly I care. Even if I didn't care anything about anybody else involved in a tournament beforehand.
After listening to you read off that list of people who are involved in the PFL $1 million tournaments, I will grant you that it is more interesting than I first thought, because they have a pretty good collection of free-up independent talent in those tournaments. However...
Didn't even mention Magomed Karamov.
Through no fault of the PFL itself, ain't nobody got time for that, man. When we're out here running 100 UFC fights a year, and we got Bellator to contend with and ONE FC to contend with, ain't nobody got time for that. And I would add to that, this guy Ben Askren, just retired a few months ago at 18-0 after holding it down in the welterweight divisions over there in Bellator, after holding it down in the welterweight division over there in ONE FC, and we are pretty much down to our last chance to find out if the funky one, Ben Askren, is either on the short list of the really, really good 170-pound fighters to ever compete in this sport, or if it has all just been smoke and mirrors. And there frankly has never been a better opportunity to decide that, short of him making peace with the UFC and going over there and fighting in the welterweight division, there has never been a better opportunity than having Rory McDonald over in Bellator, where you now have a guy who is recognized far and wide as one of the best 170-pound fighters in the world, and he is down to clown with Ben Askren. And it's weird to me that Scott Coker would downplay it and basically say, yeah, we're not all that interested. We'll see what happens. You know, Askren has a contract elsewhere. We don't really know what the deal is. And it's weird for Ben Askren, although perhaps telling, that for years and years he has strutted around and talked about how he would beat anybody and nobody wanted to fight him, et cetera, et cetera. Maybe sign one as to what's really going on was when he went over to fight in ONE FC, and now I don't know. Do we buy that he is interested in coming over Bellator to fight Rory McDonald, or is all of this just sort of posturing? To me, there's something compelling in that, finding out if Ben Askren is really, really good and the guy that he has said he has been all along, or if it has all been something of an act and he sort of knows it.
You know, I'm not saying I'm not interested in that, because I do think that you're right. I would still like to find out. Like, let's put him up against some tougher competition and find out what he does. It doesn't seem like he's enthusiastic enough about it. It doesn't seem, Scott Coker's reaction made me think, well, either he has an idea of what ONE FC is going to want in order to make a deal. Because you saw that tweet from the ONE FC CEO where he's like, I'd love to see a champion versus champion fight. We can make that happen. And it's like, okay, what is he going to want for it? Like, nothing. He's not just going to give him up for free there. And maybe Scott Coker knows more than we do about exactly what that would cost, and maybe feels like it's not worth it. Or maybe just is trying to downplay his own interest to drive the bargaining price down. I don't know. But it seems like there's just not... It seems like the reason everybody's calling Ben Askren out, and I wrote a little bit about this before, when it seems like, Roy McDonald's doing it and Dylan Dennis has done it. For one thing, I think it's a good way to sound like a tough guy, because you're like, hey, I want this undefeated dude who, it's not like calling out Conor McGregor, because then everybody's like, well, you want to get paid. That's why you're calling out Conor McGregor, and everybody's doing it, so it doesn't look that cool anymore. If you call out Ben Askren, it makes you can tell everybody, hey, I just want to test myself against the best in the world. This guy says he's the best, so I want to beat him and prove him wrong. Plus, I don't think he's really going to take the fight, so I'm not really that worried that I'm actually going to have to do it. Like, I'm not worried about, hey, am I just going to get taken down and smothered, because I don't think he'll ever say yes to it, and the powers that be will never be able to make it happen. Therefore, it's a completely safe call-out. Yeah, and it seems sad to me, though, if Ben Askren just sort of, sails into the sunset. Yeah, it's totally sad. Without ever, either demanding or getting the opportunity to prove whether or not he was really, really good. Yeah, no, I mean, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that the entire way Ben Askren's career has played out is not sad, and kind of highlights for you some of the weird things about this sport, that you could potentially be the best fighter in it in your division, but we'll just never get a chance to find out, because that's just not the way it works. All right, let's do Just Saying Stuff, and then we'll get out of here for this week. Ben, what is your Just Saying Stuff? Well, Chad, you sat there, you watched the Bellator main card, you saw four submissions, 3 of them in the first round, pop off one right after another. Just a jiu-jitsu guy's dream right there. You know what I'm saying? But I'm just saying, the most impressive one to me is my man, Rafael Lovato Jr. goes out there, submits Gerald Harris with a sneaky little armbar, and then the reaction is just like, pretty good roll. Just had a pretty good roll there. Felt pretty good about how I pulled it off. Anyway, who wants to go next? I'm just saying, Rafael Lovato Jr., that might be somebody I can get into.
Okay.
Just saying.
Well, Ben, like I said earlier in the show, I talked to Frank Mir earlier last week before he ended up losing to Fedor Emelianenko. Was reminded that Frank Mir is an interesting dude to talk to in this sport. And I just wanted to read a quote that didn't make it in the story, but is a quote I've been thinking about ever since I talked to him. And so I asked him, as one of the only true heavyweights in the Bellator draw, if he thought that his size and strength would be a big advantage for him in the tournament. And here's his response. If you and I get into a sword fight, and you have a 5-foot sword, and I have a 2-foot sword, it seems like you have a hell of an advantage. But then, if I say, yeah, but we're fighting inside a 6-foot house, you'd be like, oh shit, your sword's not an advantage now, is it? That's the great thing about combat sports, is that we can constantly adjust and move stuff around. There are no clear-cut advantages. So I guess this week I'm just saying, what?
So it's a 6-foot house?
6-foot house with a 5-foot sword and a 2-foot sword.
Okay.
I mean, we know what he's trying to say, right? If you fight in close quarters, maybe your big sword isn't such an advantage.
I still feel like it's going to be a problem for me. That sword.
The guy with the bigger sword probably still has an advantage.
There's not that much room for me to move around in a 6-foot house.
Here's the thing, Ben. What if you turn the sword sideways? And then I just sort of stab you with it. You've only got 1 foot to get out of the way of my 5-foot sword.
I need to see some blueprints for this house before I really come up with a game plan.
I'm just saying, I've been thinking about it, and now I hope all of you are too. Just saying.
Just saying.
That's going to do it for this week's CME. Check us out next week. We'll probably be previewing that UFC 224 card.
Something like that.
Is that right?
Sure, I guess.
Plus, I think Bellator, the next, don't we get the final fight of the Grand Prix tournament is on May the 12th? So we'll probably be talking about that also. Ryan Bader versus Muhammad Lawal. As for right now, though, we are done. We are through. We are out.
Secretly, which Gina Carano move are you hoping the fans pick?
I don't know that I want to say, because I don't want to swing the voting one way or the other. Haywire, I want it to be Haywire so bad.
Though, I mean, I feel like the weirdly bare bones plot synopsis for the other one really, I have a lot of questions that I need answered.
I mean, they're both home runs, right? They're both absolute home runs. You didn't even talk about the supporting cast of Haywire.
Okay, yeah, that is kind of star-studded. Channing Tatum,
Ewan McGregor,
Michael Fassbender.
What about who's in the Blood? Is that
nobody
we've heard of? Just Carano?